Hello everyone, I'm Colin Canet. Today I'm going to be making some dovetail splines, really cool looking, that you would typically use in the corner of a box, maybe even a wider picture frame, something like that. So you're going to watch me make the jig and the dovetailing material and my conclusions in the end, and what you can learn from this. So sit back, relax, and watch the process as I go through this. There's the two pieces that I need to glue together now. And to keep this project moving along, I think what I'll do is I'll use my doweling jig and some epoxy, and that'll get us through this a little quicker. I just need to line up the face side. Now I'm going to drill the face side so that they'll fit together. Okay, let's take a moment to do a test fit here. I have these colored dowels that I use because they're a little bit thinner. I've made them a little bit thinner. Otherwise, the regular ones that I put in here when I'm going to glue them, they'll fit so tight, sometimes they're hard to get out. So let's do a test fit and just see. Let's see, that should go like that. There we go. Now, as I mentioned, I'm going to be using some 5-minute epoxy on this, just so we speed up this process a little bit. Well, there's a clamping extravaganza, isn't it? The clamps are on here to keep it square. They're not clamping any pressure at all. In fact, what's really holding this are these L brackets that I have here to make sure that I get that nice and right at 90 degrees. So that looks good. Okay, I've just taken the clamps off and it's perfect all the way along. What I want to do now, because I don't have a lot of real estate for that router bit, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to nip the bottom of that off. So we'll go to the table saw and just sort of cut the bottom of that off. There's the dovetail router bit installed in my router, and you can see now when I put this on, and you can see that I've cut the bottom off there, you can see when I talk about how much real estate I have there. I actually have a little bit to play with now, so I could lower that bit probably just a tiny bit. So that's good. The last step in the assembly of the jig is to put it together, and this is going to be the part that will run up against the fence. And you can see I've got some little angle blocks here. What I'm going to do is fasten those Well, come to that part of the build where we do the testing, and you can see I haven't done anything, so you're going to see this the same time I do. Now I've adjusted the bit as best I can, and it's a little hard to do that because it's really guesswork, because there's nothing to line it up with, and I just threw together a couple of 45-degree corners here, but look at it, fits in there just nice and perfect. And what you would do typically, you would go run through this side, then you could run through the other side. That would get those two on equal sides. Then you could do a middle one if you wanted to, just by realigning the fence or putting a block in there, which is what I would do, is just put a block in there, and then you could do all four sides. But right now, we're just going to do one test side and run that through and just see what it looks like. What I suspect is the bit is still a little bit too high, so let me check that. Okay, I've reset the bit for the third time. Let's try that one now and see what that looks like. There we go, that's better. Okay, so there we've got the height. So now we have an idea what the height is. And that's a nice, thick spline in there. Let's see if we can cut some wood to go in that. Well, after a little bit of trial and error, I did finally get a dovetail to fit in there. The first one I made was, the first two I made were actually too slim, but that one fits in there nice. So I'm going to glue that in there, and we'll have a look at it. Then I'll trim it off, and we'll have a look and see what it looks like. I'm just going to trim this piece off now that the glue has dried. And there's our little test spline. I'm just going to put a little bit of Osmo on it, just so you can see how that pops out there, what that looks like. Now what you're looking at there, if you notice a little bit of a color change in there, it's because when this was cutting out, because this is edge grain, that little piece of wood popped out of there, and that's why you're seeing a little bit of difference of coloration there. And if I get some Osmo in there, that should actually disappear. Well, that concludes my video on making the dovetail splines. And now I'm going to take a minute and tell you the good and bad with this project. First of all, the dovetails look great, especially if you're using contrasting wood. They really stand out nicely. And you know what? They're fairly easy to make. The other thing, the jig itself is easy to make, and it's easy if you've got a router table, easy to use on a router table. Now let me tell you the bad parts. Making the spline material, I had a real chore. I think this is the third or fourth attempt of running it through the router, and before I got something that was suitable enough, tight enough that I could glue it in there. But the real problem with this material is not so much getting the size, but now you're dealing with a wood in a very fine corner like this. And I used my finest pull saw, and I still got a little bit of chip out. And as soon as I saw that, I realized that it doesn't matter how you cut this wood, there's a chance, because you're working with wood in a little corner like this, one piece of wood, and sometimes just the wood itself will just chip out no matter what you do. And I'm not prepared to go to all the work of cutting splines, putting splines in, and then the last thing I do is when I cut them, some of them chip out. So I'm kind of rethinking this whole process and wondering what other materials I might be able to use that I could put in there that aren't going to chip out, or another way of making splines that aren't going to chip out there. So maybe some of you have some ideas that we can all benefit from. So that concludes my video. I hope this was some help to you. If you go ahead and make these, maybe you can tell me how yours turned out. I'm Colin Kennett for Woodwork Web. Thanks for watching.